The United States Special Operations is composed of elite members of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. They are the most highly trained military personnel in the history of the world.
In the military sense of the word, special operations in wartime involves three primary missions. The first of these is special reconnaissance, second is direct action, and the third is unconventional warfare. Now, all take place behind enemy lines, normally deep behind enemy lines, and by deep in this case we mean at least 30 miles in most cases. Special reconnaissance is just what it says. It's going back and looking for enemy forces, looking for infrastructure. It's direct action are raids conducted either air, sea, or land by any of the components of the Special Operating Forces. And finally, UW is unconventional warfare, is organizing guerrillas behind enemy lines. That's the original mission of the Green Berets. So those are the three wartime missions. Now, in peacetime, in addition to training to conduct those three missions, our Special Operating Forces also conduct what we call foreign internal defense. I think a better term might be nation building. And then in addition to that peacetime mission and the three wartime missions, in both peace and war, they're responsible for counterterrorism. In the fall of 1986, Congress passed legislation directing the establishment of the United States Special Operations Command. What they envisioned was taking all of our Special Operating Forces, the Air Force Air Commandos, the Navy SEALs, the Army's Rangers and Green Berets, and putting them in one command. In April of 1987, I was selected as the first commander. We have 9 unified commands. The commanders of those commands are referred to as CINCs because that refers to a commander-in-chief of a unified command. There are 5 of these commands that have regional responsibilities.
Our special forces groups have a regional orientation. If you are assigned to the 10th Special Forces Group, your orientation is Europe and Northern Africa. If you are assigned to the 7th Special Forces Group, your orientation is Central America and South America. First group is oriented towards the Pacific. Third group is Africa south of the Sahara. And the 5th Special Forces Group is the Middle East.
In addition to that, there are 4 supporting unified commands. You have Space Command, Transportation Command, Strategic Command, and finally, USSOCOM, or United States Special Operations Command. He's responsible for training and preparing and deploying forces in support of the other regional unified commands. They did that in Just Cause in Panama in support of Southern Command. They did it again in Desert Storm in support of Central Command.
USSOCOM is made up of 4 components: the Air Force Special Operations Command, Joint Special Operations Command, U.S. Army Special Operations Command, and the Naval Special Warfare Command, totaling over 45,000 elite personnel. This figure does not include Marine Reconnaissance Battalions, which, although not attached to USSOCOM, may be called upon if required.
The Special Forces are known for using unconventional techniques, but the fact of the matter is these techniques are as American as apple pie. If you look at what the settlers who first came to this country faced in fighting the Indians, they were totally confused because instead of standing and fighting like they'd expected, the Indians would use silent infiltration. They'd fought at night, they'd attack, and they'd retreat. Well, the settlers learned very quickly. All of us are familiar with the Rogers Rangers, and we're familiar with the legendary Daniel Boone. And there's a great heritage, if you will, for our Special Operating Forces.
In the Civil War, Confederate officer John S. Mosby and his band of cavalry irregulars captured a senior officer in his headquarters 17 miles behind enemy lines and returned with him without a casualty. The infiltration techniques of Mosby's Rangers inspired many namesakes, none more significant than the U.S. Army Rangers, created as elite infiltration units during World War II. 5 battalions in Europe and 1 in the Pacific. Hand-picked soldiers successfully carrying out demolition and intelligence missions in quick-hitting raids, the result of careful preparation and training.
I've been associated with the military for 43 years now, since the Korean War. And over that period of time, there's been a phenomenal improvement, not only in the quality of our training, but in the training standards. I don't think there's a better example in any place, and you'll see what it takes to earn the Army's Ranger tag.
The Airborne Rangers of the 75th Ranger Regiment proudly wear their black berets, trained in infiltration skills and specialties which include ambushes, urban warfare, lightning attacks to temporarily seize key objectives. They are the Army's elite light infantry soldiers. But before becoming a member of the 75th, a soldier must first become a Ranger. There are required pre-training courses which one must pass. A physical training test, a 2-mile run to be completed in 14 minutes, 52 seconds or less, a swim test, and basic skills certification. Those who pass wait to be called to the first of 4 phases of training. Phase 1 is conducted at Fort Benning, Georgia, and is the foundation for all other training. This first phase includes the development of personal performance skills, such as the log walk rope drop and the 25 event obstacle course. Also, there is basic reconnoitering techniques, the daily unit run of 3, 4, or 5 miles at an 8-minute per mile pace, combat techniques, demolitions and explosives, troop leadership procedures, and reconnaissance missions. Those who successfully complete the first phase move on to Camp Frank D. Merrill in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Dahlonega, Georgia. With continued emphasis on leadership disciplines against conventional enemy units, with most missions taking place at night. Mountain techniques, climbing, rappelling, and advanced rappelling, including the final 200-foot rappel. The third phase of training is conducted around Camp James E. Rudder in the swamps of northern Florida. Specialized training such as survival, environmental and technique training, reptile identification, small boat operations, and parachute exercises. The final phase is in Dugway, Utah, with emphasis on combat operations, developing leadership qualities under live fire conditions. There are a total of 35 live fire exercises. Upon completion of this intensive 8 weeks of training, Rangers are ready and able to carry out the motto earned during World War II in an heroic assault on Omaha Beach by the 5th Ranger Battalion. Rangers lead the way.
World War II saw the introduction of a host of new technological advances in modern warfare: buzz bombs, missiles, strategic bombers. In our own country, we had a number of major developments. The establishment of the Organization of Strategic Services, or OSS, headed by General Wild Bill Donovan, had been a legendary soldier in World War I, got out, became a distinguished New York lawyer, and came in, formed the OSS. And in fact, the patch that United States Special Operations Command wears today was designed for the OSS by Bill Donovan during World War II. We also saw the first use of Navy frogmen in clearing beaches for over 100 different amphibious operations, and of course the frogmen are the forefathers of our Navy SEALs. We saw Merrill's Marauders in Southeast Asia, and finally we witnessed the establishment of a combined Canadian-U.S. command, the 1st Army Special Service Force, which is actually the forerunner of the current Green Berets, or Special Forces.
Our 1st Army Special Service Force training camp opened in 1942 at Helena, Montana, with volunteers from the U.S. Army and Canadian services. A primary training skill for all was the parachute jump, which at this time was a frightening experience for both the trainers and the trainees. It didn't always go according to plan. The big, uncontrollable chutes were at the mercy of the winds and the inexperienced. Some could look forward to early retirement. Yet finally, most were awarded their jump wings. These commando units were trained in gunnery, winter weapons, hand-to-hand combat, and running on the double to everywhere they went. 2.5 years later, December 5th, 1944, the Special Service Force was deactivated after heroic service in Italy, France, and Germany. On June 20th, 1952, 2 years after America's entrance into the Korean War, the United States Army Special Forces was organized. Modeled after the commandos of Donovan's OSS in World War II, these elite troops, 2,500 in total, were to counter the guerrilla tactics of the enemy in ways the regular Army troops were not trained to do. By 1961, the beginning of the Kennedy administration, the Special Operations Forces had grown to include 3 Special Forces groups and 1 Psychological Operations group. The Special Forces were a Kennedy favorite. His authorization of the wearing of the Green Beret was a significant step in their national recognition. Vietnam proved the need for further preparedness. Training included communications, a representation of a Vietnam village with occupants who shoot and disrupt attacks. Also weapons of the period, counterinsurgency techniques in the Gabriel demonstration area, John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center.
Now that's how it was 30 years ago. Now let's take a look at what it's like today, how they're trained, how they're equipped.
My name is Captain Atkinson. I'm the detachment commander for ODA 744, 2nd Battalion, 7th Special Forces Group. The Special Forces Operational Detachment consists of 12 personnel, 2 personnel in each of 6 specialty areas, beginning with 2 officers, a commander and a detachment technician or executive officer. There are 2 operations and intelligence sergeants, 2 weapons sergeants, 2 commo sergeants, 2 medical sergeants, and 2 engineering sergeants. Because of this, we can operate either as 1 12-man team or 2 6-man split teams.
In Special Forces, we recruit no one off the street. We recruit strictly within the service. That's both for our officers and for our enlisted soldiers.
Special Operations personnel are seasoned soldiers with many qualifications, including second language potential.
I'm Airborne Ranger Pathfinder qualified. I've worked with foreign units from 5 different countries in Latin America. I speak Spanish.
I am the senior enlisted member of this detachment. I have been Special Forces qualified for 16 years with assignments to 7th Special Forces Group, 5th Special Forces Group, and the Special Warfare Center.
I've deployed as an ODA member to 5 countries in Europe, North America, and South America. I have a working knowledge of Spanish.
I've been 14 years in the military, 4 of which have been with Army Special Forces.
I have been deployed to 3 Latin American countries and 3 countries in the Middle East. I have a working knowledge of Spanish.
I've been in the United States Army for 16 years. 15 of those years have been with the Special Forces.
I've been a weapons sergeant, I've been an intelligence sergeant and operations sergeant in Special Forces.
The Ranger training we have seen, airborne training and Pathfinder training, are all part of the skills one might bring to table before becoming a Green Beret. Other certifications, such as the 6-week-long water infiltration course in Key West, Florida, are also recommended before attending Special Operations schooling.
Regardless if you're an officer or an enlisted soldier, you must come to selection and assessment. That is a 23-day course which we bring the soldiers here to Fort Bragg, TDY, temporary duty, which allows us to look at that soldier for 23 days, see if he is reasonably fit, reasonably motivated, reasonably intelligent, see if that he has basic soldier skills, assess the fact that he is a disciplined soldier, give him a psychological battery of tests, and then if he makes it through selection and assessment, we in fact bring him to our qualification courses. On the qualification course, the officer, the weapons sergeant, the communications sergeant, and the engineer sergeant will go from 22 to about 30 weeks of training.
The last months are spent studying unconventional warfare techniques until they are ready for their final exam. A 2-week exercise in which they perform an insurgent operation involving towns and townsfolk so real that the players have been known to forget that the people they were dealing with were only acting. All of the A-Team's newfound skills, logic, patience, and understanding are called upon to successfully complete their mission. Each A-team has been specifically trained to perform functions that may differ from other A-teams in the group. Each group has certain equipment preferences as well.
I was primarily designated on what we call a rucksack team. A rucksack team does most of its infiltration by static line parachute and then walks great distances and carrying all their equipment on their back. Rucksack gets heavy and stays heavy. The primary weapon that we all carry standardly today is the M16A2. We are hopefully replacing that this summer in 1994 with the M4A1 carbine, which is just a carbine version of a larger weapon, the M16A2. We're going to go back to the original full automatic mode that we used to have on the M16A1. And we're going to have a removable carrying handle that exposes a Weaver rail so we can attach a scope of some kind if need be, a night vision device, a thermal device, or a day scope. It's a shorter barrel, a lighter weight, more compactable, and as efficient in accuracy as the M16A2. There are also 2 sniper weapons assigned to an A-team, and these are designated as the M24 sniper weapon system.
This is the M24. It's a standard issue sniper weapon. It's a 5-shot bolt action weapon. It's capable of both day and night. It has a day scope on it now with an attachment of this that simply snaps on, has night capability without losing the daytime zero.
2 members of the team are trained in sniping techniques. Both are trained as a shooter and an observer, and they usually operate against anti-personnel targets, but they also fire against some soft material targets.
The teams you see practicing are in the early stages of their training, still learning to perform with their gun sights. Once proficient with these at 600 meters, they will move on to scope sights, both night and day, firing effectively at well over 1,000 meters.
But it's hard to see 1,000 meters at night without an effective night vision device.
The ANPP BBS 7A night vision goggles attach to the head, while the night scope works on the weapon. There are also laser pointers called PAC-4s, which are affixed to weapons and help locate targets when viewed through the proper goggles or scopes.
The intent is to shoot one time and kill the target. We try to train our people to do that as accurately as possible. If you have to shoot more than once or twice, you develop a signature and put yourself in jeopardy. It's a very sophisticated art.
Usually, 2 team members will carry the M16s with M203 40mm grenade launchers attached under the barrels. The snipers also use the Barrett 82A1 50 caliber semi-automatic rifle.
The Barrett 50 caliber has a day and night capability. This is used not for personnel, but for what we call hard targets. Machinery, radar sites, airplanes, something like that. It has the capability out to about 1,200 meters. Shoots a real large bullet.
They must also be familiar with foreign weapons, the German assault rifle, and the Israeli Uzi, or others used by the host forces they are training.
On our teams that are mounted on the Humvee, the Desert Mobility Vehicle, and the Humvee, standard Humvee, we do have capabilities of mounting larger weapons, which are the M2 50 caliber machine gun and the Mark 19. Most of our activity does occur at night: infiltration, movement to target, and the operational strike against the target is happening at night.
Superior Electronics has given special operations the communications capabilities which can be used in even extreme hostile situations. A-teams have been known to operate within 50 yards of the enemy without concern about being detected. The LST-5C, a 12-pound satellite radio, is capable of reaching any spot in the world, but it is only carried when it is necessary to maintain real-time contact with the command post. Normally, they just stick with standard VHF and HF radios from the conventional inventory. For overland transportation, there are occasions when they actually don't have to use foot power. The new highly mobile ODA teams are equipped with 4 HMMWVs called Hummers. The Hummer is a 4-wheeled vehicle capable of traveling under the most severe conditions. The team has 3 trailers and 2 modified Kawasaki KLR 250 Enduro motorcycles, a full complement of parts and fuel, which gives each team a self-contained range of over 1,200 miles. Their primary mission is the insertion and extraction of other special forces with the ability to transport a second fully equipped A-team. These teams must also be able to infiltrate by water. For silent infiltration, A-teams use the Klepper folding kayak, which holds 2 soldiers, hundreds of pounds of gear, and can travel noiselessly at 5 miles per hour, and be disassembled in minutes into an 80-pound pack that can be carried by one. Army Special Operations airborne infiltration to land or water is usually performed by the proud 160th Aviation Regiment.
The 160th Aviation Regiment is a 3-battalion regiment. It has 2 battalions in the regimental headquarters located at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and 1 battalion located at Hunter Stewart Field in Georgia. Currently, we're doing a modernization of the 60 Black Hawk and the 47 Chinook into a new soft model, which are going to be called the MH-60 Kilo and the MH-47 Echo.
These modifications of the U-860 Black Hawk utility copter, the M860K, have a custom-built cockpit with special displays easily viewed with night vision goggles, terrain-following radar, and an infrared sensor for all-weather flights through hostile territory. 2 fuel tanks and an air-to-air refueling boom extend the M860K's range. The second new bird, the 47 Echo, is a version of the twin-rotor Chinook, a standard for many years. With avionics akin to the M860K and internal fuel tanks giving it the longest unrefuel range of any Army copter.
That new Echo Kilo helicopter that we are bringing into the inventory is nothing but a giant computer. That aircraft will process 450,000 lines of information as the pilot flies that aircraft. But it's not that aircraft nor that computer that is significant about the 160th. What is significant about the 160th is the man that crawls into the cockpit.
Air Force Special Operations is a joint function. We always operate in a joint environment. Unlike the rest of the services who are kind of catching up to that concept, we've always operated in that concept. Working with the Army Special Forces and the Navy SEALs, we're their primary means of airlift. We have the planes that can take them in, drop them in covertly, resupply them, and bring them back out.
We employ jointly there, giving that single Joint Force Special Operations Component Commander a single belly button to push when he needs to have Special Operations Aviation in support of his forces.
The primary mission of the United States Air Force squadrons attached to U.S. SOCOM is the movement of personnel and equipment wherever called for throughout the world. Air Force Special Operations is also the result of an illustrious heritage born in World War II, when the 1st Air Commando Group airlifted supplies to the British Commandos in Burma. Known as the Air Commandos, these very special individuals were assembled by Colonel Phil Cochran to perform some minor miracles 100 miles behind enemy lines in the Burma-China theater. Using gliders and other small engine aircraft, they reached their destination undetected and within 5 days had shaped a landing strip for our planes with nothing more than crude grading equipment. From this base, hundreds of tons of supplies were delivered to the Allied troops by parachute. In the Vietnam conflict, Air Commandos flew Hueys and the first HH-53 Jolly Green Giant copters on Green Beret sorties and rescue missions. In December 1989, Operation Just Cause, Special Operations' first real action, rehearsed and supervised by General James Lindsay, was a total success, including its air support.
Well, Operation Just Cause, Special Operations was basically the initial force going into to the country. But our helicopters were there, our combat shadows were there refueling them. The combat Talon was there doing the initial air-land at Rio Hato Airfield and performed absolutely flawlessly.
Then a short 2 years later, Desert Storm.
The first action of Operation Desert Storm was an attack on early warning sites along the Iraqi border. We decided in late November, in a phone call between General Schwarzkopf and the President, that they would go with an air option on that attack. We led them in with the Pavlo III, acting as a pathfinder for conventional Army attack helicopters, Apaches, armed with Hellfire missiles. We went in exactly 22 minutes prior to H-hour, effectively destroyed both of those early warning sites.
The $40 million MH-53J Pavlo 3E helicopter, today's version of Sikorsky's huge assault transport helicopter, first delivered in 1966, is the most sophisticated ever made. Over 42,000 pounds of plane, armor plating, and electronic navigation systems which can fly at night over the roughest terrain while avoiding low-level missiles and enemy radar. And it can single out and find any rooftop, locate its own exact position in the entire world through the global positioning system guided by 18 satellites 10,000 miles in space. The Pavlo's enhanced navigation system is a complex of almost 24 individual navigation guidance systems cross-referencing all data. It includes a projected map display, which contains maps of the assigned mission and shows the helicopter's exact position at any given time. There are 2 devices which aid the copter in low-level flying. The terrain following terrain avoidance radar has a beam which sweeps in front of the ship, reading all obstacles for clear maneuverability. The other night flight system is built around a forward-looking infrared sensor which reads the energy from the surfaces on the ground and translates that data into a television image showing the approaching landscape even in total darkness. These systems and others make it possible and safe for the Pavlo to fly through desert, jungle, and mountains as low as 100 feet off the ground, avoiding even the lowest level enemy radar.
The pilots have an inordinate amount of data that's coming at them simultaneously. They're equipped to fly at extremely low levels in the weather to get to their targets and avoid enemy radars at the same time. The flight engineer is on the Pavlo is the pivot man in the cockpit and does probably more crew-related duties simultaneously than any other enlisted crew member in the Air Force. The mission is very difficult. We train very hard. The crews go through an inordinate amount of training and workup before they become qualified in that machine.
The fixed-wing airframe, which has been the most adaptable for our purposes, has been around for over 40 years. It is the C-134 engine freighter.
We've got basically 2 types of C-130s in AFSOC. We have the mobility C-130s that provide infiltration, exfiltration, resupply, and aerial refueling of helicopters. We also have our gunship 130s. We have 3 different types of mobility 130s. We have the HC-130 Combat Shadow to penetrate into enemy territory and refuel helicopters and do certain types of airdrop operations, and also air land on completely blacked out airfields. Beyond the capabilities of the Combat Shadow, the Combat Talon can operate at low level in the weather, but their primary mission still remains infiltration, exfiltration, and resupply of special operations forces deep behind enemy lines.
The Combat Talon's high-speed airdrop delivers supplies while flying 250 miles an hour. An enemy watching on radar sees no change in airspeed and cannot determine the aircraft's penetration for the airdrop.
On the Talon 2, they have a very advanced integrated avionics suite, and it's all built around the new radar system. And because the radar system is a little bit bulkier than the ones that we had before, the radome sticks out quite a bit further. In fact, some refer to it as a Pinocchio nose.
The AC-130U Spectre gunship carries on a tradition of tough gunships with incredible firepower. Now, with super sensors that can precisely fire its 105mm howitzer and array of cannons.
All special operations training is tough and demanding. Personnel must be able to run, they must be able to swim, must be able to shoot, and more importantly, know when not to shoot. But in establishing USSOCOM, one of the things we really were careful to do was preserve the rich heritage of each of our respective services. And a good example of that is the Navy SEAL training, which is as physically demanding as any you'll ever see.
Here is Richard Marchenko, ex-Navy SEAL whose book, Rogue Warrior, about SEAL activities in Vietnam, made the bestseller list.
The UDTs actually started 50 years ago. We just had our Swan Song birthdays. It started with the Navy combat swimmers. In World War II, they went in on the surface and tried to blow the obstacles for the landings for the Marines. And after the war was over, the transition was to take it underwater, and that was an underwater demolition team, and that put them in diving gear and working submerged, and basically doing the same thing. It was designed to clear beaches of man-made obstacles so that the amphibious force could land, and that lasted till the 60s, when John F. Kennedy said he wanted unconventional warfare in every service. The Army, of course, had special forces, and the Navy, out of the underwater demolition teams, formed SEAL teams, and the acronym stood for Sea, Air, and Land, the environments in which they work in. The original cadre were 10 officers and 50 enlisted men on each coast, so it was really started out very small.
The formation of the Navy SEALs in 1962 is directly attributable to the successes of these brave underwater demolition teams in World War II. But the SEALs are trained to operate in water and every other environment. The average platoon has from 14 to 20 individuals and can be divided into 2 boat teams working in the water, on land, and into the air. In Vietnam, the SEALs were used as a guerrilla force who arrived secretly by water or air and terrified their opposition. A small force of only a few hundred, the men with green faces were awarded 3 Congressional Medals of Honor, 2 Navy Crosses, over 40 Silver Stars, 400 Bronze Stars, and several hundred Purple Hearts for wounds in combat.
By the 60s, the commands have gone to O2 rebreathing apparatus, which is no bubbles, no sound. And had just started coming out of research and development mixed gas. Mixed gas gave the capability of longer and deeper dives. And the reason we needed that is by that time we had bought some Italian mini boats or mini submarines that are wet boats. I mean, you actually have to, you just fly them like an airplane, but you are wet inside. And the mixed gas gave us longer duration doing that. So we had those. The basic weapon in an underwater demolition team at the time was an old World War II grease gun, because underwater demolition team, you stop at the water's edge. You do the reconnaissance there for the landing force, and then the Marines take over.
The Navy selects its prospective trainees only after they have gone through a 7-week pre-SEAL training course and passed a series of strenuous tests which include a timed swim, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and a timed run. They are then issued orders to BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training at the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California for 25 weeks of training. The training is divided into 3 phases. For the first 5 weeks, they must get those bodies into the shape of their lives. Everything they do is at a run, the obstacle course in which individual times must be improved weekly. Long-distance swims, surf passage, and rock portage help make this as tough a training as there is in all our military services. After the first 5 weeks of hell, there is Hell Week, when they go for 6 days on a total of 3 hours sleep, less than 45 minutes a day, while performing the most excruciating physical and mentally fatiguing exercises imaginable to see if they have what it takes. The boat crews carry 300-pound logs on a 14-mile beach run through the ugliest of conditions. Hours in the surf, hours in the mud. Often more than half a class will drop out because of injury or fatigue. There is no censure for saying, "I quit." Those who do are rested and return to their previous service assignments. Those who don't move on to learn basic SEAL skills for amphibious infiltration. The second phase concentrates on the 45 land skills: rappelling, small unit tactics using weapons, pyrotechniques, live fire maneuvers, and demolition practices on land and in the water. The diving phase is the third and last phase: scuba, compass navigation, lock-in, lock-out, and other submarine operations. Training never stops, even after graduation.
Language training became an increased commodity among the SEALs, preparing for the different geographical locations that the team serviced. So that was kind of a big step forward in terms of what a sailor looked like then. The frogman in UDT wore his UDT shorts and his green utility jacket outside of his trousers and wore boondockers, and the SEALs were Cochranes and bloused, and then it was tucked in and they were tailored and they looked nicer.
Some of the SEALs' special equipment includes the F-47 CRRC combat rubber raiding craft, powered by a 35-horsepower engine with a suppressor jacket that makes it almost indetectable at 10 meters out. It can carry 6 combat divers fully equipped.
The rigid hull inflatables, or RIB for short, has been used since about the mid-'80s as an insertion platform and as a near coastal and riverine patrol craft. With a rigid hull similar to the typical fiberglass boats, except that it also uses an inflatable sponson above that for increased stability, increased seakeeping performance. We're now using ribs from 24 to 30 feet in length. Those boats carry 4 to 8 SEALs and deliver them to the beach.
Propelled by a 165 horsepower turbo diesel engine with a crew of 2, it can travel fully loaded at over 30 miles per hour.
The LAR-5, the Lambertson Amphibious Respiratory Unit, came into service with Naval Special Warfare in the mid-1980s. This replaced an earlier unit and brought with it enhanced performance, smaller size, better maintainability, enabling the combat swimmer to conduct his missions more covertly as a closed or semi-closed rebreather unit.
Usual water wear for a SEAL is a wetsuit or dry suit with a buoyancy compensator to swim at a desired depth, and a black balaclava for warmth and camouflage. The SEALs have selected weapons which work in a hurry under the most adverse conditions. They do not expect to be engaged in prolonged combat. The M203 launcher with aiming light is extremely effective. The SEALs also prefer to use the M14 rifle, which works well even when wet. The underwater transportation includes the 4-passenger SDV Mark 8, 21 feet long, running on a DC motor powered by rechargeable batteries with a crew of 2. This remarkable machine can operate in extremely shallow waters.
Since the mid-1960s, Naval Special Warfare has continued to develop capabilities based on their mini submersibles, the wet submersibles that came into being in the late 60s. Have developed specific missions for the SEAL delivery vehicles above and beyond simply swimmer transport. The boat now has some capability on its own without putting SEALs ashore.
When ashore, the SEALs now have access to land vehicles, firepower, and equipment similar to the other Special Operations units.
Over the next 3 to 5 years, we are planning to deploy a number of systems adapted to counter the emerging threats on the modern battlefield, including chemical weapons, the deployment of laser systems, and a large number of sensors, including radars, low light level video, and thermal sensors. In keeping with our focus on operations from the sea, we are deploying boats adapted for improved seakeeping and speed, systems for better command and control, improved communications, including bringing the intelligence to the user, both the SEAL in the field and the Joint Forces Commander.
The newest craft in the SEAL arsenal is also the largest. The PC Patrol Coastal class ship will provide naval special warfare support, including SEAL operational missions. 170 feet long with a 25-foot beam, it has a draft of just over 5 feet and can make full rudder turns at speeds of 35 knots with less than 10 degrees of roll. With 4 officers and a crew of 24, these ships provide weapons and magazine storage, a diving platform, and a staging area for gear, a crane to launch and recover rigid inflatable rafts, everything to embark a completely equipped 8-man SEAL team. All combat-ready special forces must have received their airborne shield and other special training.
There are basically 3 models of parachutes that we use within special operations. A static line circular parachute and a steerable parachute, and has gores cut out of the parachute with toggle lines, which allows the parachutist to negate about a 13 to 14 knot wind if he can turn his chute into the wind. And the ram air chute, which is a square chute. And the teams that are HALO, high altitude, low opening, or HAHO, high altitude, high opening, use that particular chute.
Some Special Forces detachments use HALO as a means of infiltration. Utilizing this method, soldiers can exit an aircraft from altitudes of 40,000 feet, free fall to 4,000 feet, activate their canopy, and fly to an assembly point on the ground. The shape of the canopy actually allows the paratrooper to glide to a predetermined point. With favorable winds, this distance can be as great as 25 miles.
On these long glides in the upper atmosphere, chutists breathe from 2 bailout bottles of compressed oxygen. Besides a magnetic compass, a new global positioning system, GPS, has worked well. There is also advanced training in snow, desert, and jungle, as well as the littoral avenue from the sea.
There are no Marine forces assigned to Special Operations Command. However, each of the Marine Expeditionary Units has a small element that's called a MUSOC, Marine Expeditionary Unit Special Operations Capable. And they are used to augment our special operating forces when they're employed, or they're used, as we say, in extremis, if a special operating force is not available.
PSYOPS is the Army's 4th Psychological Operations Group attached to Special Operations. These soldiers really do work with their brains more than their brawn. Their weapons are the printing presses, radio, duplication machines, and anything else that will confuse, distort, and convince a populace to act or react to the stimuli provided by PSYOPS.
During Operation Desert Storm, we dropped leaflets. These leaflets would tell the Iraqis that the next night we would drop the largest conventional munition on their position, unless they would like to come south and join their Arab brothers in Islamic fraternity. And for those that stayed, they got quite a shock the next night. After we would drop the Blue 82, our HC-130s would take off and drop another 500,000 leaflets telling the Iraqis, see, we told you we were going to do it, and we did it. And tomorrow night, we're going to do the same thing. Unless you'd like to come south and join your brothers in Islamic fraternity.
Here are a few of the millions of leaflets dropped upon Iraqi troops which weakened their will to fight. These and other PSYOPS efforts helped to bring about the surrender of more than 80,000 Iraqi soldiers.
There were a number of factors that influenced the Congress in writing the legislation that resulted in the establishment of the United States Special Operations Command. Probably foremost among them was the failed hostage rescue mission in Iran. We found when our embassy was seized that we simply didn't have a force in being that could infiltrate and rescue the hostages. So as a result, an extensive training program was undertaken that took months to put together. The force was trained, it was launched, and as everyone knows, it made it deep into Iran, but ended up at a makeshift airfield called Desert One without the lift adequate, helicopters adequate to continue the mission into Tehran, and the mission was aborted at that point. And the key lesson learned there was that you can't create a special operating force after a crisis occurs. It has to be in being and it has to be ready when called upon. A second factor that influenced those framing the legislation establishing U.S. SOCOM was the successful rescue mission in Grenada on Operation Urgent Fury. This involved the force of both conventional and unconventional forces. We had paratroopers, 82nd Airborne Division, Marines from the 2nd Marine Division, and Special Operating Forces. While the mission was successful, it demonstrated that we had some serious problems in inter-service coordination and communications and command and control. And as far as the Congress was concerned, this clearly dictated a need to have one person, one command responsible for training all of these forces. I think most of you are aware that our special operating forces are invariably the first into any country in any operation. True in Just Cause in Panama, it was true in Kuwait, it was true in Iraq, true in Somalia. What a lot of people don't know, however, is that they're also the last out.
We have all the smaller, what used to be part of the Soviet Union, that are building their own little armies that need somebody to train them. And I'd say that the special operations people belong doing that because they're good trainers, one, because they're highly skilled, but two, they're also very good collectors.
There are Army Special Forces in 51 different countries worldwide. We have Special Forces supporting the Drug Enforcement Agency on our borders. We have units operating in Central and South America. All of them proudly wearing the Special Forces and Special Operations patches on their left shoulder and the American flag on their right.
Leading the way in Just Cause and Desert Storm, feeding the starving in Somalia, rushing to protect our citizens from the ravages of nature in our own nation. In a short but illustrious career, the United States Special Operations Command has shown us the future, changing the face of conflict from this time forward, thoroughly trained and equipped to answer the call to action swiftly and successfully.